guys, so I'm going to film a little currently reading video. I'm actually dipping in and out of a number of things at the moment without necessarily being in a rush to finish any of them. I think oftentimes we can feel quite a bit of pressure to finish books. Not that you shouldn't finish books, but that we see finishing books before we start other books, or the speed at which we read, or the number of books we finish in a year as priorities in our reading, as opposed to necessarily just going with what we're feeling at the time. So like I said, I'm dipping in and out of a few things at the moment. The first one I would say is the one I am prioritising finishing the least, because it's a collection of fairy tales. So what I'm more interested in is just enjoying each fairy tale as I feel like reading it. So maybe I'll feel like reading one fairy tale or a couple of fairy tales. Maybe it'll take me a year to read. I don't really mind. I have read, I think, the first 3 fairy tales in this collection, and it is The Turnip Princess and Other Newly Discovered Fairy Tales by Franz Xavier von Schönwerth. And I picked this one up quite recently after seeing it on Jen Campbell's channel. It is a collection of fairy tales, like the title implies, which have been newly discovered. A German manuscript, I believe, from the 1850s was discovered, giving us the only recorded versions of these fairy tales. And I don't know if it's just because it's been a while since I've read a collection of fairy tales, but these ones seem particularly wacky and out there and strange to me. But that's maybe because the first couple, although they have a lot of the elements of traditional fairy tales, fairy tale imagery is very repetitive, you'll know if you've read a lot of fairy tales, and certainly those elements are there. There's also quite a few aspects of them that took me aback and surprised, which is really nice for a collection of fairy tales, of course, because who doesn't like to be a little bit surprised by their collections? So I'm really intrigued to see what I discover in here, if there's some other stories that are really different from what I've read in the past. And so far so good, certainly, with this one. They're also, and the back of the book says this, quite dark. Now original fairy tales in general are quite dark, but there's something about these ones that are a little bit gruesome, and I think it goes along with their wackiness. So I definitely recommend this to you based on what I've read of it so far, but I've only read the first 3 fairy tales, like I said. I am reading a physical novel as well, and this one is The Corn King and the Spring Queen by Naomi Mitchison. I am like 60 odd pages into this one, and it's very long. It's over 600 pages with quite small print. It's originally published by Canongate, so I do think this one will take me a while, and I'm trying to savour this one. I am really enjoying it so far though. It was first published in 1931, and Naomi Mitchison is quite a well-known Scottish author I haven't read anything by before, but if this one goes as well as it started, I'm sure I'll be checking out more of her work. It's set in the 2nd century BC, in an ancient world as close to the original as what they knew at the time this was being written. But Naomi Mitchison, amidst this, has created her own culture, who are a people that live on an island in the Black Sea. And Naomi Mitchison has taken inspiration from real cultures from antiquity and situated her people amidst, like I said, what they knew to be the history of that actual period at the time. But not only is it a fictional book set in antiquity, there's also magic in there. A number of the female characters of this culture that Naomi Mitchison has created are witches, and from what I'm reading so far, it is a kind of beautifully constructed people situated in an antiquity that I myself am quite familiar with, and I really appreciate that mixture that's going on, because it's so interesting to note the real ancient Greek people and culture that she mentions, as well as learn about this really intricately built people and place that she's created amidst that. And I really like her writing. I think it is just some beautiful prose that weave together a really interesting and kind of magical people. But it's also quite dark. Our main character has been asked by her father to use her magical powers to turn the chief, the Corn King of their people, mad in order for her father to succeed him. So she has kind of been pressured into marrying Tarek, the Corn King, and taking on the role of the Spring Queen by her family in the hopes that she will fulfill this for them. And I'm not sure how that's going to pan out yet, obviously, because I'm still only 60 odd pages in. But yeah, really enjoying this one actually. I'm also listening to 2 audiobooks. Now the first one, when I realised I was still reading it, it, I almost felt a sense of embarrassment that I would be talking to you about it in a currently reading video again. As if somehow the fact that it's taken me longer than a month to read it is a shameful thing, which is ridiculous, and I have gotten over that. But that is The Dark Circle, which was shortlisted for the Bailey's Women's Prize for Fiction, and I have been reading this one for over a month, or listening to an audiobook for over a month. And the last time I talked about it with you, I was still in the first half of it, and I am now much closer to the end. I am almost finished it, but I have increasingly enjoyed this one as it's gone on. It's set just after the end of World War II, and it follows characters who together are in a tuberculosis hospital. Now, I thought this one sounded interesting when I read the back, and I heard some really good things about it from people I trust. Plus the fact it was shortlisted for Bailey's meant I was really interested to read this one, and have of course been reading it. But I must say, if I picked this one up in a bookshop, not having heard anything about it before, it wouldn't necessarily be one I would have purchased. I am, however, really glad that I did pick it up, because although it started slowly and I was never disliking it, I wasn't necessarily enthralled by it, I have grown to really enjoy this one as it's gone on and become even more captured by the story and the characters, and that's why it's so nice to have booktubers to get recommendations from, as well as look to prizes to maybe check out books you wouldn't have already. So I would recommend this one to quite a lot of you. I think the way it's written is one of the best things about it. Obviously the plot and the characters are great, but I think the way that the author has executed those things with her writing is what has really made it as enjoyable a listen, as well as the narrator actually of the audiobook. I really enjoy the narrator. It's narrated by a male narrator whose name I can't remember, but I'm really enjoying their narration. But I do think it is very well written. I think the writing style works very well for portraying the time period it's set in, the 1940s, but I do think writing style and time period have a very important relationship, so I think that works really well in this book, and I'm really enjoying it, and I will probably look into other books by this author. I'm also really interested to see how it ends for these characters, and I think one of the interesting things has been seeing their fates kind of be decided by other people, and the different levels of knowledge that different characters have. Has been really interesting to see alongside one another. But the last book I have to talk to you about that I'm currently reading is another audiobook that I recently started because I was in the mood for something a little bit humorous and fantastical, so I decided to start a book by Tom Holt. This is called Barking. This is a comical fantasy book set in London, and our main character is a lawyer who gets invited to join a new law firm, which is basically just all his old school friends who have also become lawyers, and it's pretty much what Tom Holt tends to do, which is taking very ordinary people and very ordinary situations and then flinging some absolute madness into the mix. And I believe from reading the back there are werewolves involved in this one, but they haven't appeared yet in the storyline. And I am really enjoying listening to this. I think comical science fiction and fantasy for me have always had a very calming effect, and I love to laugh, although I'd say so far I haven't, you know, stomach rolled around on the floor laughed. I have smiled and tittered, but I am very early on in this one. I'm only about an hour into the audiobook, and the actual fantasy elements of the story haven't really come into play. One thing I will say though is that I adored Tom Holt's J.W. Wells series, which was a 3-part series, although there are more books in it just following different characters, which I do hope to get to. And they were some of the funniest books I've ever read, particularly the first one, The Portable Door. But I didn't finish Donut, which I started reading by Tom Holt, which is the first in another series, because although it was funny sometimes, the characters and plot didn't actually have me engaged enough to keep reading, so I just ended up never going back to it. Even though I was listening to an audiobook, I got distracted by other things and never felt compelled to return to it because of it lacking that engaging plot aspect. So I am hoping that Barking sits more in the Portable Door category of keeping me interested throughout with an equally engaging plot that I can follow to some extent, rather than just feeling like what is going on and why should I care. But we will see, won't we? Those are the things that I am reading at the moment. However, do let me know if you have any thoughts on any of these books or have read any other books by the authors I've mentioned in this video. I'd be really interested to discuss them with you. I'd also love to hear your thoughts on not pressuring yourself to finish books that you are enjoying and taking your time with things. But until next time guys, happy reading. I'll see you all again soon. Bye!